Started. On the screen, you should be able to see the PowerPoint that will be showing. This presentation is co-sponsored with Farm Shed. They are a nonprofit organization located in Stevens Point that promotes local foods and connects farmers to I guess, people that eat, all of us. My name is Susan Schuler, and I'm the Education and Outreach Coordinator with Recycling Connections. Using the chat again, just again to keep our comfort level with the Zoom platform, what are some of the interests you have on this topic? Some of you had said you're just beginning off, you're looking for tips to get started. That's great. Karen, I'm going to have them just kind of, if folks want to say anything more specific of what brought them here today, feel free to use that chat area for that purpose. And Karen, I actually can't see the chat box, so I'll have you just monitor that throughout. And Karen, because I can't see the chat, have we received some of those responses there?
Okay, I'm going to unmute myself, Susan.
Great.
So that I can let you know. We have Jamie said, still trying to get fiance on totally on board.
Okay.
And then Pamela says, she's sorry, what was the question? So maybe you can repeat
your
that.
interest in the topic itself. What brought you here today, more or less?
Okay. And then Taylor says, I'm an educator that speaks on composting, so always learning to gain more skills and also improve my own at-home compost.
Great. Glad you could join us today, Taylor. Okay, so my background, I've been composting for 20 years, and I have made many, many mistakes that I'm hoping you'll learn from today. This is a picture of my compost setup. I have 2 of the bins. I have in the middle between those 2 bins is actually a stockpile of my browns. We're going to talk about browns later today. The brown material, which is full of leaves, a lot of dry material that you need a lot of for composting. The piles that you see way in the back here are my curing piles. So those are kind of in the final stage of the composting process. I cover them with a really thick layer of leaves to do the final curing process. Curing is very important with composting to get that final product to be nice, very crumbly black that you're really looking for in your finished compost, finished soil amendment here. So many people come into composting with various reasons why. I started off with somebody who I didn't use the compost itself on my garden. I wasn't a big gardener in my early years. I just didn't want to put the food waste into the landfill. That was my motivator in the first 5 years of composting. As I've grown in my composting comfort and through the years, I now have many gardens throughout my yard. I live in Stevens Point. I'm living in a town, but I have several pollinator little gardens. I have food garden as well, actually a pretty large garden itself. And now I'm looking to not purchase compost every year to add to my gardens. And so I'm getting to the point where I don't even need to purchase compost to add to my food plots, which is really important to me. So I also wanted to share the Institute for Local Self-Reliance has found a lot of opportunity for food waste reduction for a whole community. Really, they promote community building. They also promote food waste reduction, whether it's at the source itself from purchasing the appropriate amounts of food for your family, and then trying to divert any usable foods that you're not going to use, either get it to pantries before it expires, or getting to some livestock where we can feed animals. Then the third way of reducing food waste is through composting, and that's what we're talking about today. And then landfill should be the last option. In many cases, the common practice is we have bad food in our house and it goes right into the trash can, to the landfill. We're trying to integrate opportunities for food waste reduction before it's just right to the landfill. So whatever
Susan?
your reason, yes?
Oh, I'm sorry. I was waiting. This is Karen. Waiting for a little break, and I do want to share some other comments that
Okay, great.
people shared so that
Okay.
it will help. The next one was Pamela. I have an organic garden and always wanting to learn more.
Okay.
Linda says, I want to introduce the concept to my education center.
Oh, great.
Christopher says, I am looking to start composting at home, hoping to start using it in my garden when possible.
Okay.
And then Jamie's, the last comment here was, I want to improve soil conditions for home gardening and divert waste from going to the dump.
Okay,
And then
great.
I'm putting myself on mute.
Okay, great. So your level of composting, the level of how much you'll manage it will be determined by your reasonings you just said. If you're someone just looking to divert your food into your ground, but you're not going to utilize it too much, you're probably not needing to put so much management into it. You're going to do more what we call cold composting. For those who want the finished product, there's going to be, you're going to have to manage that. And let's go through some of the steps for that. The first step is really finding out how much food is going into your compost bin. When the Institute for Local Self-Reliance did a study, I think this was just last year, 2018, the big point here I wanted to point out is households are all over the board when it comes to how much food waste is coming out of your home. This varies on how many people are living in the household, what are you purchasing? Are you purchasing a lot of fruits and vegetables? Do you cook a lot? What kind of food is coming through there? 23 pounds to 83 pounds difference. So your very first step in any composting is getting a handle on how much food waste particularly is coming from your household. So that will be kind of the first step. The second statistic that I have here is really speaking to municipalities of saying you have an opportunity for savings, real hard savings, if you can encourage households to compost at home. So what is compost? The big thing here is it is not dirt, it is not soil, it is soil amendment. You're increasing the fertility of your soil to allow its ability to retain water, retain nutrients that you actually want to feed your plants. So that's really what compost is. When you are composting, the act of composting, you're kind of mimicking nature in a sense in that decomposition process. So you are taking on the inputs, putting in grass clippings, adding food scraps, you're adding leaves to a pile, and you're mimicking what nature is already doing on the forest floor. They're decomposing. Now, by actively composting, you're speeding up that process of decomposition so you can get the finished product that you're looking to do. You're getting that soil amendment that you can add to your garden, to add to your plants, to allow them to grow in a more fertile soil setting. The key component that you really just focus on when it comes to composting is our microorganisms. These are your workhorses for your soil. These are the ones that are you want to keep happy because they're the ones that are going to decompose all of your material at the faster rate. Now, the ones we're showing here, the microorganisms, are microscopic. You cannot see them with the naked eye, but they are the primary decomposers that are very important for the beginning of your compost process. You do have macroorganisms you'll see in your pile as well. Those are the worms that we think of, but there's so many more decomposers that are in our compost pile. And all of them we want to keep happy. We want them to work for us. We want the right microorganisms in our pile to do the work for us. So with that perspective, because these are all living organisms, they need the same thing you and I need. They need water, they need oxygen, they need food, and I kind of say a home because really microorganisms don't need a home, but we're going to be creating a home with our compost pile that's going to keep them very happy. It's going to increase their numbers, it's going to increase their decomposition to allow them to work for us. So I'm going to take each of these components and we're going to go through that because this is how the basics of making sure you're composting the most efficient way. So water, it's surprising how much water you really need in a compost. I mean, again, you are feeding these live organisms that live in your structure, in your compost bin. So a good test with how much water these organisms need is using a hand squeezing test. I know it seems kind of funny, but what you almost want to do is you want to check that moisture level. Once you get good, you don't necessarily have to feel, but if you're getting started with composting, go ahead, you can use a glove to grab sort of the center or pick away a little bit of that compost that you're looking for to find out, is it moist enough? Look in the inside of the pile. So you're going to take a pitchfork, you're going to pick up, turn over some of that, so it's not just the fresh food waste you just put on there. That's not going to give you the test, but you're looking for some of the compost that's further along. Grab a handful of that. If you wring it out and some water droplets start forming around your glove or between your fingers, that's a good amount of moisture that you have in there. If it's dripping down your elbow, for instance, that's too much moisture. If you have too much moisture, you'll want to remove the lid or let it just dry out. When it starts raining a lot, there's not much you can do. Just give it some time and it will dry out. In our hot summers, come July and August, that's when we'll actually be watering our compost. Yes, you may need to water your compost at some point just to make sure those decomposers are continuing to work for you during those hot days. That's water. Oxygen. Now we know there are decomposers both that love oxygen, but there's also decomposers that thrive when there's not a lot of oxygen. The decomposers you're going for and you're trying to make happy are those that love oxygen. They work fast for us. They give us that nice smell. That earthy smell is what you should be smelling from the aerobic decomposers. The anaerobic decomposers I have encountered before in my compost bin. They don't like oxygen. They work very slow and they produce a really sulfur, foul smelling. My compost has gone anaerobic on me before, and all that is an indicator of is I'm not making my anaerobic decomposers happy. So it's allowing those other, or those aerobic decomposers, they're not happy. So the anaerobic decomposers, I needed to shift the components in my compost in order to go back to an aerobic system. It doesn't mean you've killed everything, you just made a mistake, and you can troubleshoot by changing up the components of the pile. How do we do that? What do I mean by components? The components are the food. There's nitrogen that you need to incorporate into your pile. This is your food scraps. These are your, even your coffee grounds, kind of the fresh materials you're putting in. Green grass, not dried out, but the green grass you're putting in. These are going to be food for your compost pile and that you need to feed your pile with. I want to add, you can put tea bags in your pile as well, is just fine. You might want to just remove that staple on them, but the string and the little piece of paper on there is not gonna hurt that. The other component are your dries. We call them browns sometimes. These are your strong carbon sources. You actually need 2 to 3 times more carbon source, dry material, than you need than the nitrogen or the carbon or the fresh greens. So, and that's by volume. So every time you add some nitrogen, some of that fresh material, the food scraps, always add or have some carbon available to put on top of that. The carbon or brown materials we're talking about are straw or hay. Hay has a few more seeds in it, so it's not as recommended. It works, it does the job, but you could get a few more seeds in there than you want. Leaves are your best source of browns. I even ask neighbors if I can take some of their leaves so I can have a stockpile all year round. And I will put them in a wire setting in my yard, just like you saw in that beginning picture, just to hold them. And every time I add food, I'm adding some browns on top. Sawdust works as well. It has a lot of surface area on that, so just be mindful of that you'll have to aerate that. You'll have to add a little bit more oxygen into there. But leaves work really good. Anything that paper, dried paper, I would not put too much with heavy inky paper. You know, a magazine or something is not good for it, but newspaper works as well if you need some carbon source or some browns. So the question we probably get the most of, what do I not put in my compost? I would avoid meats, bones, and fat, dairy products, and oils. So anything with like a heavy salad oils, or your any mayonnaise, heavy mayonnaise, old salads that you're putting in, don't put those in your compost. Those are the ones that really attract the varmints. They add some human pathogens or can be detrimental to your health if you don't compost properly. Those are the things that are adding some things in that you just have to be cautious of. You don't want to put in whole branches or large logs. They're just not going to decompose for you. So break them up. Make sure they're down to, the size of your, at least, smaller than, an inch or so width is a good idea. Dog or cat or even human waste, those are no-nos in a compost pile. So I would not compost that. Charcoal has some added chemicals in there. I wouldn't put any charcoal, even if it's after you've actually cooked that down and it's what's left in your charcoal grill. I would dispose that not in your compost that you're going to be utilizing for your gardens. Any treated wood. So some people, this is one that gets a little bit of debate out there. If you make a compost, if you build a compost pile with treated wood, rule of thumb is use untreated wood for building your compost pile if you're using a wood structure. There could be over time leaching that goes into your compost pile. You're trying to avoid those chemicals from getting in. And although that's over time, you're still adding those chemicals in there, and it's just not recommended. And then any persistent weeds. I have tons of weeds in my yard, and I'm just trying to pull them out. They're taking over some of my beds. And sometimes I just take that to the city compost and let them deal with those. So that's an option too. But they're just really hard to kill if you just put too many of them in your compost. And just as a joke, don't compost your kids. Before the sign up, a few of you, or I received a question about bedding or manure. So can you put chicken manure or rabbits or horse? Yes, all of these, chickens, rabbits, guinea pigs, cow, horse manure are all really good for a compost. One thing I learned the hard way, because I have backyard hens, I just thought, wow, yeah, the bedding already has a bunch of dry material and it has the manure already mixed in. I'll just throw that in my compost pile and let it go. And all it did, this is where it went anaerobic on me within a day, because it ended up being a 75, 80 degree day, and it just heated my pile instantly, got so hot, and just went anaerobic. There wasn't enough oxygen in there, and it just heated up way too high. So bedding and manure is actually really good. You'll just need to be sure you're balancing that. Know how much manure is mixed with the bedding material. And you'll likely need to add actually more bedding material and more browns into your pile in order to make that compost be the conditions you need it to be. The other thing you want to be aware of is making sure you're being safe. This is probably good for any composting, anytime you're composting, anytime you're turning your compost pile. Wear gloves, use good footwear. A mask or bandana is also nice to use when you're turning. There are some fungi that can get in our lungs, and we just have to be mindful of that and be cautious there. So it's good practice to always keep yourself safe when you're dealing with anything related to the compost pile. So let's talk about piles. Anything on what we can put in or not put in? Has there been any questions, Karen, that have come in about what to put in your pile or what not to put in your pile?
Okay, I just was unmuting. Yes, there is a question. Can you use used up flavored or artificial flavored coffee grounds or use decaf coffee grounds?
Absolutely. Yes, all of those are fine. Those are all, yeah, those are all fine.
Okay, another question was, can you address anaerobic and or grass? If sometimes a pile of grass sits too long and it goes, you know, anaerobic, so what, maybe a troubleshooting suggestions?
Same exact thing. You've just put too much grass in at one time. You didn't balance it enough with your browns. So you'll need to add oxygen. So turning that pile that you just put a lot of grass clippings in and mix that with as many leaves. Thinking about that volume ratio, you need 2 to 3 times more browns than you need for those greens. So add more browns. Take your pitchfork and turn that pile, and then just monitor it as well. Good question. All right, so we're going to move. Okay, go ahead.
Okay, maybe I'll just answer this a little on the side. It's a continuation of the grass thing, but I'll just answer maybe on the side about, well, I mean, if I have grass that turns anaerobic before I put it in, can I still use it?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I do. I would just be mixing it. It's the same thing that happened in my pile as well. I got it, it went into an anaerobic system. So I took my bin apart. I cut down the pile completely because it's just too much material in one spot. And then I started layering it. Later in the presentation, I'm going to talk about layering it like a lasagna. And that will help cutting down the smell, first of all, and you're starting to favor the aerobic decomposers more than the anaerobic decomposers. But you're going to have to add some oxygen in there. You're going to have to add some of those browns in that. So it's okay to cut down the pile and just re-layer it to make it a little more happy, if you will. Anything more before I move on, or you're good? I think you're good. I see you back on mute. So, okay. So when we talk about the actual building your structure for composting, this works fine. You can create a pile in your backyard if you want. It's very easy to do. You could do it without any investment. But you see the problems here. There's obvious problems. This is wide open to any animals that would be coming in. It doesn't look so great, and it's really not going to compost really effectively for you. So you can do this, but there's other suggestions that we would like you to consider. So do-it-yourself bins are very popular, very easy to do with just sometimes what's laying around your house. It's cheap, it's easy, it does the job. You can create 3-bin system, you can create a single bin. Again, it's going back to your purpose and what your end product or your end of the day, what do you need out of it? Are you going to use that compost, or are you just looking to divert your food scraps into a bin that doesn't go to the landfill? The problem with constructing it yourself is, you know, maybe your bin isn't as durable in the end. You're going to be doing some fixing on it, some updates to it, probably every year, depending on how well you construct it. Some of them work great and they last a very long time and can be great. It's just going to take a little bit more time for you to construct that. There are so many different suggestions online for how to build your compost bin. If you're looking to create one where you're going to get a final finished product, then a 3-bin system is probably ideal for you. If you're looking you don't care if you actually get an end product, you just want to kind of divert your food waste, a 1-bin system is probably fine for you. Again, you need to know how much food waste you're putting into that bin, how much material that's going to be ongoing. It's very important to know that up front before you even get started. And before you even start building that bin, have an idea of how much material you're looking to manage. This is the other option, is purchasing a bin. It makes it very easy. They're durable. My bin's been around for 15 years and it's still going very strong. It looks nice. Some of the cons is this is going to be your most expensive option. The investment is usually anywhere between $25 to well over $100 if you're going to go into the tumbler systems. Then when I say tumbler systems, I'm referring to the bin that you see right here. There's many, many different designs out there. This is just one example of what that is. It's a bin that you can easily turn. It's elevated off the ground for easy access. It is not recommended necessarily from our staff itself. We really like the ground tied bins, the bins that are on the ground or close to the ground, to allow microbials to freely come up, and that connection and that to the earth to allow that exchange. With one that's removed from the ground, you're going to just have to monitor it a little bit more, have a little bit more input, see what's in there. But it works well for a small yard that you don't have a lot of space and you just want to kind of keep it looking neat and orderly. It's hard to get your finished compost out of this. So if you're looking for that finished product, you don't have multiple bin systems here, and they're very expensive. You know, they're the most expensive option for starting out. So think about that. We are more partial to the other two bins itself that you see. Definitely, this is the one bin we do sell, and we'll talk about that at the end here too. So placement, think about your yard, think about neighbors, think about shade versus sunny. It doesn't matter if you place your bin in a sunny spot or a shady spot. Both of them will have composting, decomposition happening. In a sunny area, you're probably going to have to water it more often. It's going to dry out more often, but it will still work for you just fine. I have mine in a sunny area, and it's just based on my convenience. And so I just monitor that. You want it to be near your garden space if you're going to use it for your garden. So you're just not hauling it so much between your garden and the compost pile. You're going to have at the end of the gardening season, you have all of that leftover plant material that can go right into the bin. So it's convenient to have it near your garden. You do want it at least 2 feet away from a building, just to make sure that you are attracting unwanted little insects and environments closer to the building. But if you're managing your compost well, you shouldn't have any of those types of problems. Don't put it directly against a fence. Mine is near the fence, but it's not touching the fence. And that's very important because I have a wooden fence, and if I had it right up against the fence, that is nice woody material that would degrade over time quicker if my compost pile was touching the fence itself. I learned this one kind of the hard way. Having it near a water source, or at least where a hose can connect. I used to carry buckets of water to the backyard and water my compost, but I realized, boy, you need a lot of water when in the middle of August, when your compost pile is really slowing down because it's just so warm outside and it hasn't rained in a while. Watering it, 1 bucket wasn't enough. So I found getting it closer to where I can reach a hose to it was more convenient. And just have some good drainage. Something easy for this is just putting some of that real woody, thicker material that has some air that flows through there on the bottom for your first layer of your compost bin. Allows for that good drainage, nice oxygen incorporating at the bottom of the pile. And so the way I like to compost is called the lasagna layering. There's a lot of different methods out there, but this is one that works really well for me. And you're mixing 2 to 3 parts of browns, your carbon, your dry material, so your leaves, your straw, things like that, with green material. And you're just layering it. And at the bottom, you see stalky kind of coarse material on the bottom that's going to allow that air movement under your pile, that oxygen to get in the lower parts of the pile. That's really going to get compact over time. It just keeps it up to allow a little bit more airflow through there as you're adding material on top. And so if you wanted to do the cold composting method, this is for those passive, this is a passive way of composting. This is for somebody who really isn't looking for a final product. They just want to divert their food. Cold composting is kind of layering it and leaving it. You can continue layering it. Your decomposition process will continue happening. You're going to see that pile slowly just compact over time. You just keep adding your food scraps, add that brown layer on top every time you add some food scraps, and you'll see your pile will compost. It's very low effort. You're not really doing a whole lot to water it or to turn it. You're just happy with that. It's slower. You're not going to have finished compost within maybe a year at the earliest, 3 years maybe. But that might not matter to you. You might not be needing to use it for anything like that. This cold composting process also means your temperatures in your pile may not be getting really high. So you could be getting some seeds that grow in there. When we see tomato plants growing in our compost or pumpkins, vines growing out of them, you're cold composting. You're not doing anything to really heat the pile up to get it to stop the germination of those seeds. But that's fine. Some people are just happy with that. They'll take those tomato plants out of their pile and grow them themselves. I've done that before. I've just let a pumpkin plant grow right out of my compost, and I use the gourds just fine for decorating in the fall. Hot composting, this is where you're really an active composter. You are actually wanting the finished product within a season, let's say. You're going to be layering, still continuing to layer that just like the lasagna style method for composting. But you're going to actually turn your pile maybe once a week, maybe every 2 weeks, depending on how quickly you want that compost happening. Because we live in Wisconsin, or most of us, chiming in here, winter months it's not applicable because your compost piles will freeze. It's tough to keep that decomposition happening. So we get a little break in the winter. But when spring hits and once that thaw happens, you can start actively composting, adding water if you need. Spring, we usually don't have to add too much water because we have a lot of moisture from the rains. But you could have finished compost in just as early as 6 weeks. I've never been that good. 3 months, 4 months is more typical for me. 6 months, just to be sure everything is cured. That final stage of composting is curing it. I like to have the compost pile sit for the final stages of decomposition before I actually utilize it. So when we're talking about temperatures, if you have a thermometer, a composting thermometer, because you want to be really monitoring that pile, I would invest in a thermometer. Your hot active compost is going to happen when the compost pile hits 130 to 160 degrees. You need to turn that pile so all components of the pile are actually hitting those temperatures so it can kill any of those seeds, and even for any seeds or even some pathogens, the the bad bacteria that can be harmful to us. If we're going to use it on the garden, we need to get that heated up over 150 degrees for 3 days straight to prevent the seeds from sprouting and kill any of the bad bacteria, the E. coli and such that could grow in that compost pile. Because we're going to be utilizing it, we want to make sure that those temperatures hit for 3 days straight. Your finished compost should look really beautiful, nice, dark brown or black, crumbly. You shouldn't be able to recognize leaves in it. It should smell beautiful and earthy. And it should not reheat again. So once you have a finished product, because it's not heating up anymore. Some people do screen their finished compost. So if you have, this is a good picture where they pretty much have finished compost here. You can see some hay or straw still in there. You can filter that out and throw some of those longer, bigger pieces that still haven't fully broken down into the second bin here. And that will give you that nice crumbly material that you can add to your soil to allow that soil amendment to carry that nutrients, give that soil structure you're looking for that your plants are going to love. So if we have odors that come up, any odors at all, your rule of thumb is just add browns. If it smells like rotten eggs, if it smells like ammonia, you're just add browns. Get as many, that's why you really want to collect those leaves when you can in the fall and have a good amount on hand because this will troubleshoot those. If you have some of those rotten smells in, those are going to attract your varmints that you don't want. You know, the skunks or the possum might come in. So really make sure you have enough browns. That's your key when you have any odors per se. If your temperature of your pile is just too low, you just are lacking nitrogen, and this is where you add your green material. So low temperatures are where you need some of that material that's fresh. So go ahead and add the greens, add the manure if you have access to that. If your temperature is too high, add the browns. Or perhaps your pile's just too large. Is it possible you can break your pile up into two? It allows you to manage it a little bit better too. This is reiterating that temperature of where compost happens. Steady compost takes place at 80 to 130 degree range. Hot composting between 130 to 160 degrees. And you need to have that steady for 3 days to really kill any of those pathogens or prevent other seeds from sprouting. And then the temperature should range for steady compost happening between 80 and 130. So temperature is really important, especially if you really want to be a very active composter. Invest in that thermometer so you can monitor it. It's not necessary if you are really just not looking for that finished product that same year. But if you are looking to utilize it, it's a good investment. So a little bit more on the animals. If you are getting animals in your pile, then really make sure you're not putting any meaty or oily foods in your bin. You might want to put a lid on it. The bins that we sell has a great locking bin, and I've never had any of these critters in my compost bin at all. And I had raccoons walking right through our yard the other day. It had nothing, they were not attracted at all to the compost itself. There's just nothing in there that they're wanting to go to. So I know we have them in our yard, but they're not attracted to the compost. So get a lid for it if that's the problem. If you're really concerned, you can consider composting still, but in a vermicomposting process. That is more of an indoor process for composting, utilizing worms inside your kitchen or underneath your sink. We're not going to talk too much about vermicomposting, but if that is something of interest to you, we do have resources on our website, or you can always email us about that option for vermicomposting. This is the bin we sell. Some of you said that you already have one of these. We love them. It is our top pick of compost bins, and we have gone through and practiced with lots of bins ourselves. For over 20 years, we have sold this bin in Recycling Connections. It's 100% recycled plastic made here in North America, a really good company that manufactures it, has a great holding capacity. And I just really like that it comes apart. Instead of trying to keep my pitchfork into the bin itself all the time, I can just, once the bin is full, I take it apart and I start turning it really good. And that's when I start monitoring it for if I need to have it compost a little bit more, or is it ready for curing, letting it sit for a final stages of compost. It does come with a cookbook. So anything that we talked about today will help you, aid you with a resource you can have in your hand to help with troubleshooting if you run into things, learning more about what's curing, some of the words that vocabulary I might have used today that you're still confused about perhaps. But the good thing is, for being on the webinar today, you get a discount on our bin. There's 2 ways to get a hold of this bin right now. We are selling it for $65, but you get $5 off if you wanted. And these are the 2 ways to get that discount. So you could go through Farm Shed Plant Sale that's happening now. Upon ordering, they changed their plant sale this year. So if you are a fan of the plant sale from Farm Shed, which they have beautiful plants, great for the garden. They are not doing this due to COVID-19. This sale is now on an online pre-order format. So you pre-order your plants and then you'll arrange for pickup. If you're a Farm Shed member, the ordering is available now. If you're not a member, you can order your plants and compost bin at a discounted rate on May 16th. The other option is to go to our website and order your bin, but please do not pay with a credit card upon ordering. We're a nonprofit and we cannot add that coupon code onto our little small store online. So we ask that just select pay upon pickup. You can still pay for a credit card when you pick it up. We can apply that code then, but I can't apply it to our website itself. It's just the way it is. Just write in your comments, start composting to receive that discount. So I know that we're here today. This offer expires on May 31st. A little bit more on the plant sale. It is all taking place online, so it's at farmshed.org. If you would like to order there. Just giving a little plug for our co-sponsors of this event today. If you enjoyed this webinar and you're interested on more waste reduction, coming up, we are doing more webinars like this through Recycling Connections. Karen Sieg will be doing our next one on May 27th at 6:30 p.m. using this platform. She's going to be talking about reducing confusion on packaging and foodware. So when we look at those labels of compostability of a cup, what does that really mean? Is it compostable in your community? Helping us read labels a little bit better and navigate sort of the confusion we get from when we walk up to the bin and we have an item and we say, is this recyclable here or not? She's going to help address some of the myths we have in how to recycle right that way. And then we also have another presentation coming up. I'll keep you posted on the date and time of that, but that's waste and recycling in Portage County. All right, at this point, I would like to just say thank you very much to Farm Shed for co-hosting this today. I'll take any additional questions that you might have. And being a nonprofit organization, if you liked what you heard today, we do accept donations online. There's a little donate button on our website if you care to kick us a little bit of donations today. But I really want to thank Karen for helping out as well. Karen, do we have questions that have come in?
Okay, I have been chatting with folks, just letting you know there was originally, let's say, a question about ash, excuse me, from a fire pit. And I just shared that it's often difficult to deal with this. It's very dense, maybe not too much of it for a small backyard composting. Do you have any experiences with that, Susan, that you want to share?
Yeah, I think ash it's the charcoal that's really from the manufactured charcoal is where I find more of the problem. The ash from the fire pit, if it's really building up so much that you want to, as long as you didn't put any chemical-like material in there. And make sure you're mixing it with browns. Again, just like you had kind of said, it does get dense. And if there's a high surface area on those small little particles, so it can be fine, but really mix it with some browns is what I would do for my bin.
Okay, and other question that had let's say conversation about how to maybe decorate a bin so it looks better to suburban neighbors. I shared that buying getting a purchase bin in the first place helps it look more organized, and that's often what people don't like about compost.
Yeah. There's so many do-it-yourself projects you can do too. If you make a bin out of wooden structure, that's easy to paint and keep nice if you wanted. Again, you're incorporating more of those paints that is close to your compost. So again, know your purpose for your compost. If you're going to use that finished product on your garden, you're really wanting it as natural as possible. The other positive with having those black bins or a dark color to your compost bin is it's helping with your decomposition process. Black attracts heat, and that really helps. So I know you might want to beautify that, but maybe you're looking for more orderly structure. There might be some bins out there. They're typically not, they're usually dark colors. They're usually not really bright colors for selling compost bins. But there are ways to make it pretty or make it orderly. All
right. And Susan, some other questions that I'm just going to say that you can maybe address in general. We had questions about, for example, I'll give you about 3 questions here, because they're all somewhat related, but can we ship them? And I said, no, but there's other locations. So maybe you can go over a little bit about our group bin purchase program.
Yeah.
And, whether or not we go to locations to do presentations. And then the one other question was, does the bin for sale have a bottom? And maybe you can start with that and then go in more so about the bin sales that are around Wisconsin and even Minnesota.
Yeah, so this bin is sold in Illinois, in Schaumburg, near Chicago area. It's also sold quite a lot in the Minneapolis area. And then in Wisconsin, we have, I believe, 10 sites. I have listed the contacts and locations for this bin throughout Wisconsin. If you wanted, in the chat, we can go ahead. You might want to tell me which exact location you're at, and we can see if we can get it to that exact location.
Yeah, there's Burlington, Wisconsin, near Lake Geneva and Kenosha. But someone else did point out that they see, or maybe she already found the list of locations on our website. Okay, great. So she said thank you about that.
Wonderful. Yeah, we don't ship the item. It's quite large. Just being a nonprofit, we're not really a retail store for this. We're just doing this as a recommendation because we think this is the best bin out there. It's really worked for so many years. We do try other bins, and there's not a bin that comes apart on the side to allow you to move it really easily. You have to pull up kind of the cone itself when you're ready to turn it. And it's just, we just really like this one. But it's not sold in stores either. So that is also something to consider. But hardware stores do have bins available to consider. Okay. Somebody asked if there is a bottom to the bin. No, there is not a bottom to the bin that allows that connection to the ground, to the earth. In fact, when I put my bin down, I'm actually breaking up some of the soil that I'm going to put it on. So I allow those microbials, add that oxygen in there so they can start coming into my compost bin to really make them happy. And for presentations, you asked about presentations. We can do these webinars for your education setting. If you are, depending on how far you are located, we could also come in and do a presentation, maybe when COVID-19 gets a little more under control. The webinar is always an option. We are here and can use this platform for connecting with your community, your educational facility. I've done some presentations for schools right now as they're under e-learning, so I'm happy to serve that way. If that's helpful. We can talk further if you want to send me an email specifically on that, what you're looking for, and we can try to address that as well. Someone asked about thermometers and pitchforks. So I use a regular pitchfork. It's not thick, but what I have been, some people really like those that have very pointed, narrow spikes, almost like a fork going into your bin. I don't have necessarily, just make sure you have one more or less. Karen, do you have a preferred pitchfork per se or thermometer?
I will say this, that the pitchfork, I find an actual pitchfork is most effective for me. I've had people ask about using like shovels, for example, or there are also those, I don't know what they're, maybe like a hay pitchfork type thing where they're very 3 prongs and they're very thicker kind of thing.
Yeah.
But to me, they're sort of smaller, like you can't get very much material on them. So I still prefer a pitchfork itself. And shovels are just, I mean, you could try it, but I just don't think it's as effective.
Yeah, shovels, it's hard to get in there. You need it really to be a fork type structure.
Yeah.
And thermometers, it needs to be long enough to get into the middle of your pile. So you probably want a 2 or 3 foot thermometer for that, depending on how much material you have. Think about the pile you're creating and how long that thermometer prong needs to be to get to the center of, or probe to the center of that pile.
Yeah, and on that related, yeah, you're going to want to purchase an actual composting thermometer.
Right.
And if you research those online, you can find a variety of places that carry those. They aren't that expensive. And so, yeah, you can find them. But again, you're going to be searching for a compost thermometer.
Thanks. Okay. All right, thanks, Pamela, for giving a plug for our bin. Less expensive than some bins we've researched. Oh, thank you. We try to keep it affordable. Really, we're not looking to make a lot of money on our bins. We're a nonprofit organization, just offering this more as a service than actually going retail with it. If you, I know we're almost at 1 o'clock. If you do need to go, please do that. We will stick around and answer any additional questions as we search through this chat box. I wish you all the best with your composting. Thanks so much for your interest of being here today. This is so great. I love talking compost. Use us as a resource. We're here for you to answer any of those questions and help you be successful. So thanks and happy composting. Again, I'll stick around if folks have any questions or want to ask any questions to Karen or I. So.